Should you rent or buy when you're moving to France?
Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. You already know what you want to do. Other times, it's not totally clear.
Seems easy, but it's not always. So in this video, we're going to give you 5 items to consider when you're thinking through what is the right decision for you. This might be a little more like some of the consult sessions that we do with our clients. It's a little more conversational. We're just kind of sharing some opinions.
Yeah, exactly. Pros and cons, cultural differences, tax and regulatory things to think about, and, just a little personal advice from something that I think, knowing what I know now, I would have done differently. Hi, I'm Raina.
I'm Jason. We're Baguette Bound. We help Americans move, adjust, and enjoy their life in France. So when it comes to the rent versus buy discussion, I think, I know a lot of Americans write off the idea of a long-term rental, even if this is what they would prefer, because they're really worried that this long-term rental is just out of reach because you're a foreigner, you don't have a French job contract, you don't have a French tax record, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of an unusual rental candidate.
Yeah, you're outside of the system. Coming
Absolutely.
into it. Yeah.
Trying to break in.
Exactly.
And, that mindset can be a little correct, right? In that it will be more difficult. But we want to assure that it is definitely possible. We see people pull this off all of the time.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes they come to us like completely shocked and surprised that they got an apartment. They got a long-term lease. They've got a year. They've got 3 years. They've got 5 years.
Yeah.
We just see it all the time.
Yeah. So it is possible. And if that's what you want to do, don't just immediately give up on that because you're not sure if it's possible. I mean, sometimes I would say when people do this on their own, usually they are able to speak French reasonably well because this is going to take phone calls.
You've got to handle a French phone call.
You got to be able to handle a French phone call. Or have someone who will help you be able to do this.
Sure.
Otherwise, and a lot of times also maybe that person kind of understands the system, but definitely we have seen people do it on their own. The other option is we've had lots of people who work with companies like our friends at Ibanista are settled in France, where either they just kind of help you understand the system better and build your dossier in the best way to present it, or they can kind of help walk through that with you, right? Where they're setting up appointments and showings and communicating and
finding places.
Yeah. So I mean, you can do. It's across the spectrum how you want to approach this, and I think.
One thing I think you need to consider though is that you will have fewer options, even if you pull this off successfully.
Yeah, we want to be realistic.
Fewer long-term rental options for you initially, kind of in this first rental in France, since you're coming into the system. And it's true, you do have no rental history. You do not have a French tax return.
There's no credit score here.
The exact ideal documents that everyone is looking for. So it's not impossible. You just got to reset your expectations of what all is available for you.
Yeah. So when you're looking at Seloger or, Lemoncoin,
or any of the rental apps or sites,
know that you're seeing all these options, but especially we've heard this as a frustration sometimes when people work with someone to help them find apartments. They're like, I'm seeing all these things and they're only showing me these things that didn't meet my criteria or they're not what I wanted. Sometimes it's just that whatever you're seeing on there, maybe 20% is actually available to you.
To you.
I know that sounds so but that's the number of maybe landlords who are willing to accept a little bit of an atypical situation compared to the usual French rental.
Or may have had expats or immigrants previously, so they're just used to this before. Yeah. They've seen an IRS 1040. They've seen a Social Security statement, things like that. Yeah,
and this is, oh my gosh, networking. Never underestimate the power of networking. If you can connect ahead of time with often an international group or expat group, sometimes you'll find on Facebook Anglophone speakers, and oftentimes connecting with we have heard of more than one person, especially in Paris, where it's kind of through word of mouth. One person is leaving and you
can just slide right in.
Right, because and frequently those landlords, because they've worked with people with international documentation and, past residents, then they can, they're more open to that, right? And make sure if you have had a house in the U.S. or were renting in the U.S., bring proof of that with you. And a lot of people don't think about this if they own a house that they sold before they moved here, because you're like, well, that's not rental history. But it shows stability. And let me just tell you, stability is what French landlords are looking for. It trumps
a lot of
so many other things. Yeah. So, showing that you maintained and had a house and were able to pay a mortgage for however many years is actually...
Sure, you got to be prepared.
Yeah. So,
but to set expectations maybe for
Yep.
what the long-term rental options might be for you as you're coming in and you're new to this place.
Yeah.
It might be a bit more expensive than the average prices that locals who have done this a lot might be paying. So when you see and you kind of figure out online what's the average rental price per square foot, per square meter for the apartments you're looking at, you know that you might end up needing to pay a little more. One, you might need to go out and purchase guarantor insurance to strengthen your file.
Right.
This is like an additional layer of support that you can lay on top. A guarantor is just someone that guarantees for a fee that they will kind of step in and pay the rental price or the rental agreement if you do not for some reason. So it's just insurance for your landlord.
Right. And that could be a French, usually that's a family or a friend for local French people. But often if, you don't have that.
If you have a rich French uncle, that could be your guarantor.
That could be your guarantor.
If you don't, you might have to hire a third-party company to do this on your behalf.
And the other thing is, like, sometimes if you're looking at kind of the average priced apartment, those are going to have more local French applicants who are going to have paperwork. So it's not even necessarily that you are going to pay just more because you're a foreigner. It's that in some markets, not everyone, but in some markets, if you look just a little bit above kind of like the most competitively priced stuff, then you're just going to have less competition with, some of the
like
locals.
all the cases when there's less competition, you can stand out better.
Right. So anyway, so just like figure that into your first year budget.
Yeah. And remember that unfurnished rentals are usually a 3 or a 5-year contract. But unlike in the US, usually the opt-out terms can be at 90 days. So you may have a long-term contract, but you can always jump out of this agreement with 90 days notice. You're not locked in for the full term.
Yeah, so don't be afraid if you do find an apartment and it's like, okay, this meets most of my needs and I think it'll work. It's not maybe my ideal. Know that, but the landlord's accepted you, which is exciting. Know that like you don't have, you can keep looking. Let it be a place where you've got this box checked, you can land, you can settle, you've got something secured, and then you can always look for something else later after you've got rental history here.
Yeah. Because in that situation, your next rental, your second rental in France is always going to be a little bit easier to secure once you have this initial rental history. You've gone through this the first time, you've got a French tax return, maybe you've had time to develop that local network. You kind of know what to look for in an apartment as well. So those kind of things, that second one might be a better,
be a little easier.
A better long-term fit. It doesn't have to be the first out of the gate.
Yeah, so don't panic.
Yeah. If you don't have our resource list yet, you can sign up for it down in the description. We have a lot, several websites listed on it, places that you can find good rental opportunities as an expat coming into France.
Yeah, and you'll see some are furnished and unfurnished, and sometimes the furnished ones that are a year can also be a little easier in the beginning to get, depending on the market, again. Okay.
Up next. I think there can be an expectation, I think, from a lot of us, maybe of a certain age, that,
age.
I don't know what that means. What age am I? But, coming from the US, we kind of often have it burned into our brain. There's this social expectation that if you can figure out how to buy a house, you should buy a house. It is a sign that you are a responsible, financially savvy person. Buy a house.
I think that's the default. At least it was for my generation. I don't know if younger people still think that, but I certainly felt that as I was getting older. Like your ambition should be, if you can manage it, to buy a house.
That's what you do.
That's what you do, yeah.
I don't know that always translates here in France, at least not in the same way that it does in the US. It's not that same kind of expectation that this is the obvious next step that you would progress to.
Yeah, not that it's not something that, people aspire to or want to do, but I just think the amount of pressure around that and using it as really a measure of like how successful you have been in life, to me doesn't feel quite as strong. I think it's just partly because just less societal incentives set up to
for ownership.
For ownership, right? Yeah. The tax breaks that you get in the US, also the fact that to me, it seems like here in France, and I think kind of in Europe in general, housing is seen more of as a commodity. It's something we all need a place to live, right? And I feel like in the US, it's seen more as an investment.
It's often like your retirement part of your retirement is investing in a stable, good return house that you can cash in later on in life. And it's a little different here.
Yeah,
It can be that in France too.
Right, depending on the
But
market.
it's a very different structure.
Yeah, it's not, especially like where we are, out in countryside, houses stay in families for generations. Like it's a place to live.
Yeah. Another huge difference between the two countries that here in France, tenant protections are very strong. Rents can only be raised by so much. Your contract is often much more beneficial for a tenant than a homeowner. And I think that makes a rental, a long-term rental, just feel much more secure than it does in the U.S. You can feel more in place, you're more protected, it's more of a long-term commitment, a real commitment other than just hoping to get through to the next year.
Oh, absolutely. Because the last apartment we had in Colorado, part of the reason we moved was we had just been there a year and then they wanted to raise our rent by so much when we renewed. It was crazy. We thought we got to move. Yeah. And in France, you just don't see that as much. So I definitely think you can feel more comfortable that if you settle into a rental, you have some protections in place that you're going to be able to stay there much longer term if that's what you want.
Yeah. I think too that there's more of a sense of a rental. Even though you are renting, you are the tenant, but it still has more of a feeling of being your space here in France. I think you often see people doing a lot more with the space to make it their own, as opposed to just being there temporarily and you don't want to change too much or do too much to the house. So things like painting, bringing in your own appliances, setting up sometimes you're forced to set up your whole own kitchen, right? Bring your kitchen with you when you move into this apartment.
Which sounds weird, but then you can set up what you want, even though it's a rental.
Yeah, I think there's also often more of an expectation for the tenant to take better care, to do more.
Oh, you do small maintenance.
Small maintenance items on the house.
Yeah, when we were landlords in the U.S., we got calls about everything. A squeaky hinge.
Hey, could you come over here and look at this?
Yeah, and I think that was just the expectation in the U.S. The landlord takes care of everything. In France, it's much more like the tenant will take care of minor things and major things, obviously, heating systems and roofs and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the everyday, today, small things, usually you deal with yourself.
I think overall, renting in France and probably in a lot of Europe just feels very different than it does in the U.S. It feels a little more secure, a little more stable, a little more like...
It's just normal. It's normal. We have seen people who, they've been in the same rental for 30 years. And that's normal. That's just where they live. They're buying housing each month. And no one says oh my God, you're throwing your money away. What a waste. You've had a place to live for 30 years.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay, third thing. The third thing about renting or buying in France. I think, it's one of the most important questions, right? Maybe the place you should be starting with is the environment that you want to live in. Yeah. What is the life you want to discover here? Where is that life going to be?
Yeah.
You're looking at a big city. Are you looking at a small village? Do you imagine more of a rural, more isolated?
Buying a vineyard.
Maybe. Sure. Why not? There are vineyards here.
But depending on the kind of environment you want to live in, that's going to really affect your housing stock and probably partly what your options are around buying or renting.
You'll have very different options and choices and limitations in a giant city in France versus somewhere way out in the rural areas.
I think most of you watching are already familiar enough to know that if you want to be in the hyper center of most of the large cities, you're going to have probably an apartment style, that's the housing that's going to be available. And, if you want something that's more like single family with a yard, we've seen that as you move out from the center. Toulouse is a good example of that. We've seen lots of that around,
single
outside.
Family, small yards.
Right. Very similar to American suburbs, actually. The houses look different, and then, of course you have out here in kind of small town, village life, countryside, I would definitely say that it's going to be harder to find one of those apartment style rentals, or I think rentals in general. I feel like they're a bit less common out here. They still exist, obviously, because lots of French people are renting, but I see fewer of them.
Yeah.
And mostly it may be partly because, and this is going to depend, if you're in a touristic area outside of, in more rural setting, a lot of times, if you have a rental, it makes so much more sense for the landlords to rent just for the summer. Oftentimes they can make the same amount renting in the summer that they could if they rented it all year. And then you think there's less wear and tear. They don't have to think about it. Some places aren't winterized. So that's why if you're looking outside of the big cities, often you can find off-season vacation rentals, or like there's a couple of the websites that we have on the resource list for looking for rentals. And definitely they're vacation rentals, but you can get them at a good price the other 6 months or 10 months out of the year outside of July and
September
August.
to May is kind of the off-season rental period for these vacation type rentals.
Right, but then you're going to have to figure out how to fill that hole in the middle. So I think if this is the environment you're looking for, you probably will either you're going to need to kind of figure out how to fill those. Maybe you travel during the summer, right? If you really want to do a rental, or you just keep looking. There are long-term rentals. I'm not saying they're not.
Sure.
But I think there's going to be fewer choices, and so it's going to be a lot. You're probably more likely to end up needing to buy, I think, to find really what you want.
I mean, I wouldn't say that you need to, but it definitely changes the equation. There's just more rental opportunities in the bigger cities, in the medium-sized cities. If you want to be rural, it just changes it. It's harder to find a long-term rental, and it will just take more time.
It's going to take more time. I think that's probably
and sometimes that means it feels easier to just buy a place if you have the funds to do that, because sometimes you're weighing what's easy, what's hard. Let me do the easy thing.
Yeah. So actually, I think Jason just made summed that up better, right?
And definitely one of the advantages on that aspect for kind of being out in rural areas or small villages, usually the properties are at a little more reasonable prices, right? The price per square foot, price per square meter, for the house, for a yard is better, is cheaper, less expensive than in the bigger cities. And certainly, again, it compares very well to housing in the US as far as like the price per square meter.
But that can then be tempting because our I should buy something Americanness kicks in.
Bubbles out.
Right, because then you see a house that, especially if you're coming from a very expensive market in the US, you're like, oh, this is so affordable. We should just buy something.
Yeah.
Here's the caveat, again, with like more small town, rural areas, is that things take a long time to sell. So if you should know that if you do buy something right off the bat, and then you're like, oh, I'm not sure this was really the right area for us, it could take you a long time to sell it. So that's the balance to the affordable prices outside of the less densely populated, in the less densely populated areas, right?
And if you are, we always recommend find the area first. If you're going to buy,
lifestyle,
if you're going to make a long-term commitment, find the area first and then find a house. Don't find the house first and then hope the area is going to work for you.
And I know all of you are going to comment that you did it the other way and it worked out, and I am so happy for you. But of course, we're going to talk about the most cautious path first, because you hate to see anyone kind of feel like they got stuck.
And if you are really thinking about buying, watch this video first to make sure that you're not overpaying for that house that you're so excited about.
Yeah. Okay, this one we're going to touch on very briefly. Please do not ask us questions in the comments because we are not tax experts.
You may think I am, but I don't know a whole lot about inheritance law. No.
Yeah, but we do want you to know that, France has the inheritance laws work differently. There have been some recent court decisions that may be changing that, but owning real property in France can have complicated inheritance issues depending on your heir situation. You want to know about those before you invest.
Do your homework, read actual sites. Don't rely on what some guy said on Reddit or Facebook about their experience. Tax lawyers, notaires, those are really good resources. The notaire website in France, we'll link that down in the description, has lots of good information just for consumption. It's written by...
Notaires are the ones that handle both arranging the sale and setting up alternative... France actually has a lot of different ways to buy houses. And that affects also the inheritance laws around them. The notaires set up all that. And they're also the people who are in charge of estate issues. So they're actually a good person to talk to. Yeah. The other thing is wealth tax. Wealth tax in France is actually based on your worldwide real estate holdings. So again, this may not affect you at all, but you don't want to ignore it.
Buying a property in France might kind of push you over the wealth tax limit, and that will change your situation, and you may wish you had thought about this before you bought the house.
Right.
So inheritance, wealth taxes, property taxes, just think about those things, inform yourself before you charge down the path and it's too late to change your mind.
And we are firm believers that I think, live your dream. We don't like the idea of letting tax policy run your whole life, I realize that there are times that it's really important and may make a significant difference in your resources and the way you can live. So this is not a caution not to, but you always want to know what you're going into, Bills are okay. Surprise bills really suck.
Yeah, they're no fun. Okay, the last item to consider with the rent-buy decision is really, maybe this is the most important even too. There are lots of things to consider, but one thing that's easy to overlook is just the mental load during that first year or 2 or 3 in France. We're in year 4, the mental load is still there a bit. So it's just something to consider. And I think looking back on things now, so we bought this house around year 2 in France, and we love it. But I think looking back, I might have done something different knowing what I know now. Kind of a couple years down the road.
Yeah, we've had many conversations about this. And what do we mean about this? You know what? When part of the renovation that's going on now is we will do a house tour. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about was it worth it? But the one thing that I definitely think I underestimated is it takes a lot of time and energy to renovate a house. Even we've had a great architect and project manager who've been amazing, and the artisans who are working on our house have all been super
fantastic.
Yeah. So it's not even like there's been these massive problems, but it's like it just, you've got to make a million choices, right? You've got to go back and forth and consider invoices and there's just a million decisions to make, and that takes time and mental energy, and you're usually doing it I needed to order 30 light fixtures for our whole house for the electricity getting rewired. And I didn't all the shopping sites were new to me, right? I know where I would get these things in the US. I didn't even know here. I had to figure that out too. So I just think a lot of times it, and we've both always liked gardening. But there hasn't been a lot of times in our lives where we've really had a lot of space and time to do that. So part of the dream when we saw this place, we loved the property around it. And lately we've joked, we bought the retirement property 20 years too early because the caring for the property.
A couple acres, lots of trees, lots of fruit trees. It's fantastic, but it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Just the process of finding the house, closing on the house, moving into the house. It takes months
Furnishing,
and months and not just the time, but just all the mental effort that goes into all these things, making these decisions, being sure about it, figuring out how to move money. All those things are extra mental space that, whether we want to admit it or not, pushes out other things.
It pushes out other things.
You've only got so much space up there.
Yeah. And to be perfectly frank with you, I think for me personally, the thing that it pushed out was French. And so at the end of the day, if I have the choice between working on French for an hour or the project manager is telling me I got to make a decision on the tile, what do you think I'm going to do, right? One feels really urgent. And, so you're definitely making a trade-off. And I think it might be different if, let's say you're retired and your dream always has been to restore a historic house, which has been one of ours. We just did it a little sooner than maybe I think now might have been best for ease of use. So maybe that is your project, right? That is the dream. You are coming to France to create this beautiful garden, to invite your friends to restore a house, and that's the main focus. But if you're coming and you want to travel and that's the dream for even retirement, I would say maybe wait to buy a 2-acre property.
Yeah, but I would even caution, if your dream is to renovate the house, just know that is going to be the thing. And there's going to be a lot of other things here in France trying to figure out which butter do I like, which restaurant is good.
Oh my God, yeah.
What are, who are the new friends I can spend time with? Do I have time to do that? Not really, because I've got to work on this thing out in the yard. So it's just going to take a lot of time. And one thing you're not going to have is a lot of mental space and a lot of time the first year or 2.
So what we're really saying here after talking for 10 minutes is decision fatigue. What you want to be aware of is when you're choosing a place to live your first year or 2, are you adding to your decision fatigue and mental load, which can kind of take away from enjoying those first, months and years. So this is the thing you want to weigh.
I think moving to France and restarting your life here is a big project all by itself without anything else added on top. So just be careful that you don't take on too many projects all at once shortly after arriving. I think your future self will come back, if he could, and thank you for that.
Yes. All right. So housing is usually the number one first thing to figure out and the most time consuming when you are starting to plan your move to France. We often say, if you're feeling overwhelmed when you're thinking about moving to France, like this is often the first step, figuring out where you're going and finding some housing.
And if you are feeling a little overwhelmed and you want to talk through your specific plans, your specific timeline, your specific priorities, these are the kind of things that we do all the time in our one-on-one conversations and consultations with clients, and we love doing it.
Yeah, it's fun. We like planning, getting you to France.
So, all right.
All right. Thanks for watching.
A bientôt.